Hello there, kia ora. I've been reminded this week why Christopher Luxon decided to cut back on the amount of on-the-spot media interactions that he has. You might recall he cut the times that he had direct media-facing events, and he's really particular about the media appearances he makes. And we saw the reason for that on display on Monday at the post-cab press conference. So, a little bit of context here. On Monday, Labour announced their first election policy, the Future Fund, a wealth fund proposal that would have a seed investment less than what this government currently gives tobacco companies, and an integration of some state-owned assets and enterprises, which would make it almost impossible for a future government to sell them off, which is something that National has actually been flirting with as an election promise, but they don't really like talking about it because, well, asset sales are usually unpopular. Then later in the week, we have a massive strike happening with teachers, health professionals, and emergency services in the fire department. The Prime Minister used the stand-up to announce that they were going to build new roads. Who knew? National and roads. Ooh. And that's going to be coming from a pre-allocated budget. But after the announcement, the Prime Minister was asked about the upcoming strike action. And he was clearly flustered by everything that had been happening during the day, and he used a lot of big, scary lines that we hear from the government that often aren't based in reality when you have a look at the details.
Oh, look, I mean, I think it's absolutely tragic for the kids that have been missing out on huge amounts of school. I think for the kids that are about to go into NCA in the next 2 weeks. I think for the parents that have been mucked around.
So, for a start, teachers aren't in the room while NCEA exams are happening, and students have actually lost less time on average in classrooms from strikes than they take off sick each year. He then goes on to say this.
I think for the 6,000 patients, they're going to have their surgeries that have been on a wait list that Labor ran up 30 times.
The reason was something called, what was the technical term for it? Oh yeah, a global pandemic. Safety restrictions meant health boards had to cancel thousands of outpatient appointments and hundreds of elective operations to keep people safe. Waitemata DHB, for example, cancelled 150 operations a week and converted an elective surgery centre to a COVID ward. As a result, waiting lists did triple, but the government is running with this narrative to explain why doctors shouldn't strike.
And we're trying to power through it. I think that's an incredible, a tragic thing that they want to go to strike this week.
The concept of catching up is actually a false narrative here because our public health system was already running at nearly 100% capacity before the pandemic. So the delays compound a pre-existing issue with our under-resourced healthcare system. So getting back up to 100% capacity is not going to shorten those waitlist times. And to get an extra capacity means paying health staff what they're worth to retain them from leaving the country, like 200 other Kiwis a week are doing at the moment. Or training more health staff, which is never an immediate fix, and properly funding primary health care to reduce the stress on the hospital systems. This government's actually made the lowest per capita investment into health that we've seen in decades, meaning that they're compounding a problem that they then conveniently blame on their predecessors. He also made this claim about motivations for the strikes.
From my point of view, it's incredibly politically motivated by the unions. Let's be clear about it. If you care about it, stop the strike, get back around the table and negotiate.
Yeah, you're the government. Everything you do is political, and every decision and outcome from those decisions is political. And that includes negotiation offers that are lower than the now 3% inflation rate, meaning real-world cuts in spending power to our essential workforces. He also brought up this kind of interesting comment.
A lot of it is actually working and actually highlighting the situation that the company is in and actually having good literacy from the union side as to what the performance of the organisation actually is, in this case the government. The reality is we would love New Zealand to be wealthier so we could afford more and better public services and pay our public servants more. But the reality is we are in very difficult, straitened times, thanks to Labour.
I get that the books aren't looking as rosy for the government as they would like, but according to Preview, the books weren't in a bad shape when the coalition took over. There were some less than ideal issues like inflation rates, but that was a global issue exacerbated again by that pesky global pandemic. But other similar-sized economies have bounced back faster than ours under his leadership, and they did it without giving tobacco companies kickbacks, subsidising fossil fuel companies to look for non-existent resources and destroy our natural landscape and wildlife, landlord tax breaks, spending hundreds of millions on no ferries and God knows how much on smaller ferries, that are not quite as capable as the ones we were going to have, firing tens of thousands of public servants, gutting funding for disabled communities and road safety initiatives, the enshittification of school lunches, paying for Facebook ads to vilify this week's strikers, while also causing the worst recession since the 90s, pushing culture war bullshit over actual policy, paying staff in pet ministries significantly more than others to give government what looks like easy wins, and spending thousands on PR trips to eat pavlova in the Southern Alps. Oh yeah, and then he goes on to say this.
You don't just go run up the debt. And you guys may or may not care about this stuff, but actually you should.
That debt was incurred during the pandemic. It was used to pay for things like the wage subsidy, which was seen by Treasury as a key factor in keeping our economy from tanking and leading to a really strong economic return from restrictions in 2020. Later spending was used to invest in projects and infrastructure to create forward resilience and ensure economic turnaround and job creation. It's really easy to go, debt is scary, and ignore what you got for that debt, like people not dying. And some of that was spent on projects which were designed to create better long-term outcomes based on solid academic research, like the Māori Health Authority or the 3 water infrastructure changes, which this government cancelled when elected. They were the ones who negated that spending. But also very rich for a government that's borrowing to essentially pay for tax cuts, which the IMF told them would lead to inflation increases, which we saw announced this week, to criticise debt. The coalition like to make broad stroke claims because they're harder to push back on. It's harder to see the long-term impacts of their decisions, and they make better sound bites and headlines for the media outlets who tend to favour them. But the details are the important part. It's why the Prime Minister will jump on TikTok and claim new benefit sanctions will encourage people into work, while ignoring that there simply isn't enough jobs at the moment for everyone looking for work, that the sanction criteria is inequitable and unworkable, so those on benefits get punished, and the cost of being poor keeps increasing, so that for many the only option seems to be to go somewhere where they can find work, have a better standard of living, and they go hunting for greener pastures over the ditch. Knowing how he responds to on-the-spot media pressures and how controlled his public interactions are because of the lack of nuance and detail that he seems to use in his responses, well, that's going to make the election really fascinating because, as Prime Minister, he'll need to be front and centre, ready to defend the decisions and outcomes from his government, and he won't have anywhere to hide when there's public pushback and media scrutiny. Hey, thanks for sticking around till the end of the video. While you're here, why not hit that like button or share the video or even subscribe to the channel. You could even become a paid YouTube member so you can see things released in advance, you get access to some exclusive content, and like all these awesome people, you get to have your name at the end of the credits as well.